Underneath a quiet city in Iran, there are tunnels built for a clear purpose: to save the entire community when an enemy is approaching. This is the Nushabad underground city, also known as Uyi. It is located near Kashan in Isfahan province. On the surface, you will only see ordinary houses and narrow streets, but underneath it, there are interconnected rooms, wells, stairs, ventilation shafts, and narrow passageways. According to the official tourism website of Iran, the underground complex has 3 levels, and it was built for military and defensive purposes. Its sections are located approximately 4 to 18 meters underground. It is believed that its construction began during the Sasanian period, more than 1,500 years ago. It continued to be used and expanded in the following periods, especially during times of invasion and war. There is evidence that it also served as a hiding place during the Mongol era. In fact, it was not a permanent city where thousands of people lived every day. Instead, it was a large emergency shelter whenever an enemy was spotted from afar. Residents could enter through secret entrances inside houses, mosques, wells, and other parts of the town. After they entered, they would close and cover the entrance so the enemies wouldn't see it. The tunnels were intentionally narrow and winding. In some parts, people passing through had to bend down. Because of this, it was difficult for the enemy to run, use long weapons, or enter in large numbers. The residents, on the other hand, knew every turn by heart. There were holes and sudden drops in some passages that could slow down anyone unfamiliar with the place. Not every room had the same purpose. There were areas for temporary sleeping, storing food, keeping water, and for families to sit while waiting for the danger above to pass. There were also niches in the walls where oil lamps and small items were placed. But the most important part of all was the air. When many people are crowded underground, the fresh air quickly runs out. Smoke from the lamps can also accumulate. That's why the builders made vertical shafts connected to different levels. Air passes through here from the surface. The wells and interconnected passages also help the air reach the deeper rooms. The complex also has its own water system. In 2019, the discovery of an ancient water supply network inside Nushabad was reported. This is important because people could stay underground for several days while waiting for the danger to pass. The soil in the area is sturdy and can be carved into rooms and tunnels, but every excavation needs to be done carefully. If too much soil is removed, the ceiling could collapse. That's why they left the walls and supports thick between the rooms. The entire complex wasn't built all at once either. It started with smaller hiding places. As many generations passed, more tunnels, rooms, wells, and secret entrances were added. Because of this, a vast shelter was formed right under the houses. On the surface, the enemy could enter and occupy the town. But underground, there was a world only the residents knew. There were no large gates, no high walls. Their strongest defense was a city that could not be seen. Even though people were hiding underground, there were 2 things they couldn't endure for long: lack of air and water. That's why they didn't just build separate rooms in Nushabad. The tunnels, air ducts, stairs, and canals are all connected. With this design, air can reach different parts of the underground shelter. The builders used long vertical shafts from the surface down to the tunnels. When the temperature and pressure of the air above and below are different, the air naturally moves through the passages. Hot and dirty air goes out while fresh air comes in. It's like a natural ventilation system that doesn't even need electricity. The soil also helps a lot in maintaining the temperature. On the surface, it can be very hot during the day and cold at night or during winter. But underground, the temperature changes more slowly. Sunlight doesn't directly reach underground. Cold air from outside also doesn't get in right away. Because of this, the shelter is cooler when it's very hot above, and more protected when the weather is cold. This is important because families may have to stay underground for several days while there is danger in their town. But air alone is not enough. They also need water that can't be easily seen or controlled by the enemy. The Persians have long used the Qanat system, an underground water system that brings water from higher areas to dry settlements. The tunnels of the Qanat slope slightly downward. This allows water to flow naturally using gravity. There's no need for pumps or modern machines. On the surface, you will only see a series of small shafts used for digging, cleaning, and repairing the tunnel. According to UNESCO, the Qanat played a major role in the formation and survival of communities in the dry regions of Iran. It provided water for homes, crops, and settlements for thousands of years. Water channels and wells have also been discovered in Nushabad. In 2019, the discovery of an older water supply system in the underground complex was reported. In this way, residents didn't have to go outside just to get water while there were enemies above. They could store water in containers and get it from wells or channels connected underground. This was very important in an emergency shelter. That's why people can endure hunger for a few hours. But without water, the body quickly becomes weak, especially if there are many people crowded together in a hot and enclosed place. That's why water is one of the first things that needs to be protected. There are also channels that help the flow of water and prevent it from accumulating in the rooms. When the underground shelter fills with water, some parts of the ground may soften. Pathways can be damaged and the inside can become dangerous. That's why excess water needs to be kept away from areas used by people. Life inside the rooms is simple. There are small niches in the walls for oil lamps, tools, and food. The lamps provide light in the dark tunnels. But only a small flame is needed because it consumes oxygen and produces smoke. That's why the air duct above and proper airflow in the tunnels are important. The rooms are also cooler compared to the surface. That's why some food lasts longer. Families can bring bread, grain, dates, nuts, and dried meat. And other foods that don't spoil easily. It's more practical to have food that can be eaten without having to cook for a long time. If the fire is too strong, more smoke needs to be let out. It can also add heat to the cramped room. Life underground is uncomfortable. There's no sunlight, space is limited, the floor is cold and hard, and when there are a lot of people together, the place gets dirty quickly. That's why it's important to properly separate water, food, sleeping areas, and places where waste is disposed of. There is no strong evidence that Nushabad had a modern sewer system, but the residents needed a way to keep waste away from drinking water and their homes. They might have used separate pits, containers, or more distant parts of the tunnel. Hunger and thirst weren't the only enemies underground. Fear was even harder to deal with. While families were hiding, they might have heard footsteps, horses, shouting, and the movements of enemies above. Everyone needed to stay quiet. Loud crying, shouting, or any noise from the tunnel could reach the entrance, well, or air shaft. That's why discipline was important. Children and the elderly could be brought to deeper rooms first. Those capable of fighting could stay near the passageways and entrances. Not all entrances were placed in one location. Some entrances were connected to houses and other important parts of the settlement. There were also passageways that could be accessed from wells and public areas. When danger was approaching, residents could enter through the nearest entrance. There was no need for the whole town to gather at a single gate where they could easily be seen or blocked. Once they entered, they could cover the opening with wood, soil, stones, or ordinary household items. To the enemy's eyes, all they would see was an ordinary house or well. Underneath it, hundreds of people could pass through to a safer part of the shelter. There are narrow and curved tunnels that were also made as part of the defense. When an enemy passes through, he won't immediately see what's behind the next turn. He also can't run fast because he needs to crouch and move forward slowly. In some parts, there are deep pits that can be covered to serve as traps for people who are not familiar with the way. However, Nushabad was not used in just one period. The earliest parts of it began during the Sasanian period. Afterwards, it was continuously repaired and expanded as the rulers and enemies in Iran changed. Each new threat provided a reason to add more tunnels, deepen the chambers, and strengthen the passageways. But there is no clear evidence that the entire town hid here during the Arab conquest in the 7th century. There are also no records about soldiers walking through the empty houses while all the residents were underground. What is certain is that the underground complex was made as a safe hiding place during times of attack. The location of Nushabad helped its growth. It was close to the old routes used by traders, travelers, soldiers, and conquerors. When there was war in the region, small settlements were easily affected. Food and animals could be stolen, houses could be burned, and people could be taken captive or killed. The residents who couldn't escape right away, that's why it's important to always have the underground shelter ready. It's not only people who are brought underground. It's also necessary to hide food, water, valuables, and some tools needed to start over after the attack. In the excavated areas, pottery and other items from different periods were found. This shows that the complex was not used only once. Many generations returned here. They repaired old parts and made new passageways. Over time, the appearance of the underground shelter also changed. Some tunnels were closed off. Some walls were reinforced. Some passageways were widened so families could enter more easily. And some entrances were moved or hidden inside new houses. You don't need a complete map to use it. Each family might know an entrance near their house. From there, they would follow the familiar route to the deeper rooms. Knowledge of the path could be taught to children while they're still young. They need to know where to enter, where to turn, and where to stop if there's danger. This kind of preparation was important when the Mongol invasions came to Iran in the 13th century. The Mongol army destroyed many cities and killed countless people during their invasion. In times like these, hidden shelters became extremely important. There are reports that Nushabad was used as a refuge during the time of the Mongols, but it is not known how many people hid here or how long they stayed. And whether there were direct battles inside the tunnels is also unknown. People also didn't need to live here for many months. The goal was to survive the most dangerous part of the attack. If the enemy passed through quickly, a few days might have been enough. If they stayed in town, the residents would have to wait longer underground. Once it's safe, they would slowly come out. To assess the damage, some houses might be destroyed. Their animals and crops might be gone, but the people who will rebuild the community are still alive. This is where Nushabad was effective. It couldn't stop a large army from conquering the surface. What it saved were the people who made up the town. As long as the families are alive, they have a chance to start again. The underground complex continued to be used for a long time. Some sources say its use lasted until the Qajar period, but eventually the need for it decreased. The nature of warfare changed, roads and settlements changed, and gradually it became more difficult to maintain the vast underground network. If the ventilation shaft is not cleaned, it can fill up with dust, soil, and debris. If the entrance is neglected, it can get buried. If a part of the ceiling is damaged, the entire tunnel could become blocked. And if water gets in, it can carry mud into the lower chambers. The region is dry for most of the year, but there can still be sudden heavy rains. When the hard and dry soil doesn't absorb the water right away, it quickly flows toward lower areas. It can enter old wells, pits, and open shafts. Along with the water are sand, mud, rocks, and debris from the surface. When this happens repeatedly, the passages gradually get blocked. There are tunnels that become too dangerous to enter. There are rooms that no longer have enough air. And there are entrances that completely disappear beneath new buildings. People also didn't forget the entire underground complex all at once. It's more likely that knowledge about it gradually disappeared. When an entrance is no longer used, it is no longer passed on to the next generation. When the house where it is located is destroyed, the passageway could be covered up. When a new house is built here, the old opening might be closed off without the new owner knowing where it leads. For many years, what was once important survival knowledge has become just part of stories. There are probably some residents who know that there are old rooms under some houses, but they don't know how extensive their connections are. Some people think that what's underneath is just an ordinary basement, an old well, or a small storage area. They don't expect that these are actually connected to a larger network. So when the tunnels were rediscovered in the early 2000s, Nushabad itself wasn't a new place. What was newly discovered was the true size and connection of the underground passages. There are different stories about the exact year of the discovery. Some sources say it was discovered in 2002, 2004, or 2006 when a resident was digging a well or a sewage ditch. What's clear is that a local resident accidentally opened part of the underground complex while digging on his property. From there, a more organized archaeological excavation began. In the first excavation seasons, approximately 500 square meters of the complex were cleared and studied. Overlapping levels, narrow staircases, blind corners, defensive passages, and stones used to block certain passages were discovered. The excavation also revealed that many parts are still hidden beneath the modern town. It's difficult to excavate the whole area because there are houses, roads, mosques, and other buildings above. The soil can't just be removed without caution. The foundations of the houses might weaken. The tunnel could also collapse and injure people above. That's why the exploration is slow and controlled. Each new section needs to be cleaned, measured, reinforced, and checked for safety before being opened. There are also some passages that can no longer be entered because they're blocked or have collapsed. This means the entire Nushabad underground city still hasn't been fully seen. The part that's open now is only a small portion of the network's possible extent beneath the town. And as studies continue, its true value becomes even clearer. This isn't a secret civilization separate from the people living above. It's also not a permanent city with its own population that lived in the dark for many centuries. It's a vast survival system connected to the real city. When everything is peaceful, life above is normal. That's where the residents work, do business, cook, and raise their families. But when danger comes, a second Nushabad is waiting beneath their feet. Over time, Nushabad no longer needed the same level of preparedness. Attacks on the area decreased, and the nature of warfare changed. The modern city above also expanded. Because the tunnels were no longer often used, they were gradually forgotten, and when neglected, some entrances were covered by soil and debris. Some passageways collapsed while others were closed off when new houses, roads, and buildings were built. The knowledge of the old connections between the rooms was also lost. Some families might know that there's an old basement or tunnel under their house, but they no longer realize that it's actually part of a much larger underground network. There isn't enough evidence that a severe drought was the main reason why the place was forgotten. What happened was much simpler. When something is no longer used, it is no longer maintained. When the last people who know the way die, the knowledge of how to use it disappears as well. After many generations, the former emergency shelter became just a vague story. It was reopened in Nushabad in the early 2000s when a resident accidentally discovered part of the tunnel while digging on his property. Reports differ about the exact year and manner of discovery, but since then, excavation and more systematic study of the underground complex began. That's when researchers discovered that there wasn't just a single room underground. Many tunnels and chambers are interconnected. They discovered 3 levels, located approximately 3 to 18 meters beneath the modern city. However, the entire network has not yet been excavated. Many parts are blocked by soil, mud, and collapsed rocks. Some are located directly beneath houses and public buildings. Excavating carelessly is dangerous. If a support wall is damaged, the ceiling could collapse. The foundations of the buildings above could also be affected. That's why each part needs to be cleaned carefully. The room is measured first. They check for cracks and add support to the weakened areas. And only then are researchers allowed to enter. It also doesn't mean that there's a deeper level just because there are tunnels that haven't been opened yet. There might be an additional room or a connection to another part of the city, but it needs to be found first before it can truly be said to be part of the complex. This is also how we should look at the reason why Nushabad was built. There's no need for a mysterious global disaster to explain its size. There's no evidence that it was built as protection against extreme sunlight, deadly sandstorms, biological attacks, or an ancient apocalypse. It also wasn't built as a quarantine center against diseases coming through the Silk Road. Its most obvious purpose was defense. For many centuries, central Iran went through raids, wars, and changes in rulers. Ordinary houses and low walls were easy for larger forces to break into. So the residents built a place that was hard to spot. The depth of Nushabad was just right for that purpose. The deeper the room, the harder it is to hear noise from inside. It's also harder to reach from above. The separate levels provide extra protection. If one section is discovered, the path to the next can still be closed off. Not all the tunnels were built at the same time either. It started as a smaller refuge during the Sasanian period. As it continued to be used, new rooms, passages, and defensive features were added. So Nushabad grew not because people were preparing for a major disaster. It grew because they repeatedly needed the same kind of protection. When there wasn't enough space, they expanded it. When there was a tunnel that was easy to enter, they changed the route. When there was a new house above, they could make a new entrance underneath it. Over many generations, the whole system became wider and more complicated. The place wasn't made for permanent living either. There was water, air, a storage area, and a place to sleep temporarily, but it didn't have enough light, space, food, or sanitation for normal life over many months or years. The underground shelter was for emergencies. When the enemy arrived, the residents would go inside. When it was safe outside, they would return to the surface. They would still plant crops, raise animals, trade, and live with their families there. Nushabad was not a replacement for the city above. It was a hidden part of the city that was only used when necessary. Today, part of the underground complex has been open to visitors, but only limited areas can be entered because studies and protection of the site are still ongoing. It's not easy to preserve an ancient structure that's located beneath a modern community. The increase in visitors can add moisture and carbon dioxide to the rooms. The soft parts of the ground can also be damaged when touched or stepped on. Construction above also needs to be monitored. Heavy buildings, pipes, drainage, and excavation can affect old tunnels that have not yet been discovered. That's why excavation is not the only job of researchers. They also need to map out the passageways, reinforce the weak parts, and ensure the safety of the people living above. With every new tunnel that is discovered, we get to know more about the people who built them. They were not kings or famous generals. Most of them were ordinary residents, farmers, artisans, traders, and parents who wanted to protect their families. They didn't have modern computers, electric drills, or large construction machines. They used simple tools and their own strength to dig under their houses. They couldn't control the armies that came to their area, but they could control whether the enemy would see them. That's what makes Nushabad unique. It didn't defeat the invaders in a big battle. It removed the very target of the attack. On the surface, the houses, crops, and possessions could be taken, but underneath, the community remained alive, able to return and start again. Now the tunnels are quiet once more. There are no more families hiding in the dark rooms. There are no more guards waiting in the narrow passages. But the traces of thousands of hours of struggle remain on the walls. Every stair, hole, and turn was made because there were people who refused to give in to danger. And that is the true value of Nushabad. It is not evidence of a lost advanced civilization. It is evidence of a community that found a way to survive, not by having a bigger army, but by building an entire city that could disappear underground.